We're getting off to a strong start here on something that is going to be both a new episode of the Gamenomicon podcast and new video on what exactly is the name of your channel, Jerod? Is it your company name?
It is. Let me double check just to make sure, but I'm pretty sure it's just under my name, just under Jerod Leopold, which is the spelling is also as awkward. Yeah, it's just under my name, and we'll put the links once it gets posted. But yeah, it's just my name, JerodLeupold, and it's just that's the name of the YouTube channel.
There we go. So we'll be in both spots because this is kind of a joint venture that we are trying out. And Jerod had the phenomenal idea of not only the broader gaming project that we're kicking around right now, but also recording and releasing some of our kind of design process, brainstorming sessions, and that type of thing for folks to follow along with. So the double joint project. So thanks, Jerod.
Well, yeah. No, my pleasure. I mean, you're the brains, I'm the brawn, I think, behind this whole thing. So
It's,
the
something something like that. If folks saw how long it took me to solve our tech issues tonight, they might question that brains aspect.
but one of the things that I really
uh,
like about the idea of doing this process of recording it is that when I was even just thinking about, hadn't even gotten into it yet, is that there was a podcast I listened to that the guy who created the role-playing game Red Markets, he recorded his whole process during it in these short little snippets. Like they weren't very long, but it was fascinating to hear the idea. And I always thought one day I would love to be able to try and get back and maybe it'll help someone else if they stumble upon this at some point in time, just that everyone struggles. And it also ends up being really inspiring when you get to hear other people going through the same things you're doing or and also when they accomplish their goals, it also helps you realize that you can probably do it too.
yeah, yeah. I mean, and like tabletop RPG design, I think is a very accessible medium for that. You know, for not only the amount of content out there to help people, but like the bar for folks to get their own product out there to successfully do something. Now, I mean, as long as your bar for successful isn't $1 million Kickstarter anyway, but otherwise to at least complete your product and get it in front of people, it's very achievable.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. There's that definitely goes into this whole process too, is that, you know, in order to be able to do something, stuff like this, is that you need to be able to play games and talk to other people that are involved in the gaming industry. And wasn't really doing that. I mean, I wasn't doing this actively even a year ago, though, either, really, you know. So it's just now I'm a part of like 5 or 6 different discords. That's all they talk about is just games. You know, I look at YouTube
You
stuff and
only for 6 discords.
that only talk about role-playing games.
I was about to say honestly that is great advice to people. Limit the number of discords you're in. I was about to be so proud of you for only being in 5.
No, it balloons out pretty quickly. I've got other interests I want to keep tabs on, but
That's fair. That's fair. Okay,
but it
sorry to
is
derail that thought.
no, not at all. Well, and that's the thing too. You have to find like I've joined and I've dropped out of a couple different discords too.
Yeah.
Is that I just didn't fit in. It wasn't they weren't doing the same things that I was interested in doing. Nothing bad with them, just wasn't the right fit at the right time. And it, one of the things that I did discover is that it's easy to run into imposter syndrome when you're doing that because it 100% makes it feel like that everyone and their grandma is making a game and they're doing it better than you and they're smarter than you and they all have PhDs and masters, and it gets really daunting, at times. And then you
Yeah,
just have to remember is like, wait, we've done some good work, I think, already, and I think we can add onto part of the Wild by Tension legacy, and that's a really
yeah,
big impact that we're trying to do here. Um, and that may be a nice jumping off stone to other projects. Like I
yeah,
know we've already got Party First, and I've got stuff I still want to do with that, but I think that segues into nicely into this idea is that I was interested in possibly doing another Party First project, but you felt like you were a little burnt out. Can you walk us through that at all?
yeah. Well, I was about to say this might be a good segue first to give quick intro for ourselves because we got
Oh,
rolling here. We
sure.
are excited to hit this topic. So I'll come back around to the burnout in a minute, and I'll just start to say, which I should have done at the very top if I didn't. I'm Will Lentz. Offhand, I mean, I do not have a big name in the indie tabletop space by any means, but my first project that I put out with the help of some other awesome people, Brett, Rob, Matt, Evan, were all huge parts of that. But that first game was Party First, and we actually did not Kickstarter or anything. We just went straight to Drive Through RPG, which has pluses and minuses. But anyway, we did our own D6 system for that, which now several years later, I think it's been about 5 since Party First came out. A couple people had asked, one of which was Jerod, probably about a year ago, about making an SRD or a system resource document for that. So that just came out at this point a couple weeks ago. Um, so that we could do some other work with it, or other people could do work with it. Really is the goal here. Aside from that, I've done Zine Quest a few times. Did a niche Hallmark romance movie, a Christmas romance movie inspired game called Warmer in the Winter, and a variety of solo games. Probably my most popular thing is solo games in general, based on another SRD I did called Second Guess. So we don't need to go too far down that rabbit hole, but if you're curious, look up Second Guess, look up One White Eye. It's kind of an Edgar Allan Poe solo thing. So yeah, that's where I am, or got into this. Jerod, I don't want to steal your introduction, but the overlap here being Jerod and I have known each other for a long time through card gaming, actually, originally the Game of Thrones card game, and that eventually kind of shifted into tabletop RPG related stuff when he discovered Party First. So I'll let you roll from here with your intro.
Yeah. So I had just had to step away from doing full time work, basically. Well, no, actually, I knew that it was coming. So I've got a little bit of a neurological glitch that happens once in a while. So I can't sit in front of a computer screen for more than X amount of time. Or I need to have the ability to get up and walk away a lot and sit back down and work with it and all this stuff. So everything that I've been trained to do professionally, I just couldn't really do anymore. So I was like, well, what's something else that I've always wanted to do? I'm gonna have some time coming up before other jobs start coming up. And so I started looking at role playing stuff. I'd been out of the role playing game since I had a game store called Critical Hit Games. That was in 2014. I didn't do anything after that at all. So then I don't remember how I ran across your game. Like, I started listening to that podcast about that guy making Red Market,
Mm-hmm.
and I ran across your game, and I looked at the system, and I immediately saw this vast potential. I love how it works. I love the dynamic of it. This is Party First that we ran into. The whole idea of as the adventure keeps going, it's going to get harder automatically just based on the natural rolls of the game. That's it. It struck me for the first time in a really long time for a role playing game where it marriages the system with the setting. And if you don't know, Party First is a 1980s alt history horror game set in Russia. And just the natural ratchet up of the tension, the horror that all rolls into something just beautiful. It's a great marriage. And then, yeah, I reached out to you and I was like, hey, I love writing adventures. Can I write some adventures for the game? And that's just kind of how it started. Then
Yeah.
soon enough, after about a year of doing that, uh, you mentioned wanting to do the next rule book for it, which ended up being Twilight
Hmm.
War. That was a great project. And I think that also helped get Party First back on the map because we did that through Kickstarter. You
Hmm.
ran all that and you bundled it together. And I think that really helped getting the recognition for Party First out there as well. And once that got done, I had this idea and that we collaborated on again to make Goblin Market.
Hmm.
And that's the first game where it's 100% writing by me in it. It's got a full system. And what's amazing about it is that I hadn't gotten to explore all these different role playing games yet. So I'm in all these different Discords talking to a lot of people about design and all this stuff. And so then Goblin Market comes out, and then 2 months later, or about like, are the rule sets already written? It's done. It's all just a matter of getting it edited and sent out the door. I realized that during my design steps, I had reinvented the wheel twice, pretty much.
I mean, that happens, right? I mean, not only the reinvention, but even stealing from the best, right? Is I don't think it's a negative in the indie space, right? Like
Eh,
I think
Yeah,
a lot of people are very open with kind of trading those ideas back and forth, saying, "Hey, this one thing from Blades in the Dark, you know, really inspired me," or this one thing from Trophy, or whatever it might be.
yeah.
So I don't
Well,
know. I don't think there's any downside.
I don't think so either, but it was definitely something that I went like from pretty much only playing D&D coming to make something totally different that it's all narrative driven and all that stuff. People are already doing that. I just hadn't run into it yet.
Hmm.
So it's one thing like I got to give a shout out to Carved in Brindlewood, that whole narrative system driving. I put together my own structure and then I actually got to play online with Jason Cordova, the guy who created that in his in
Oh, I
between
didn't
game.
realize you got to. Oh, that's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, it was really cool. Like about a month ago or so. It was a lot of fun in like playing the game because I hadn't played any of those games before. Playing that game, I'm like, oh man, like this feels very familiar because I wrote a lot of the stuff that goes down the same paths. It's a different game for sure, and the mechanics
Oh
aren't
yeah.
exactly the same. But it's definitely that same feeling of narrative, the players making the choices, right? So Goblin War comes out. I love it. It's great. I'm still producing content for it. And then I reached out to you, getting back to it. I reached out to you going
Yeah.
like, hey, um, Party First, the way this is written right now is mostly aimed at just doing one shots. And I've been doing a lot of play testing with a couple of groups that I've got, and they love long-term storytelling. They love their characters getting bigger, better, stronger, faster, all that stuff. And so I've been tinkering with some different ideas that I reached out to you about. Hey, what would you feel about doing a Party First campaign rule book? And that's where you replied, well, you know what? I'm a little tired right now. So what was going on with you? Like, are you okay, man?
I mean, in the broad sense, yeah. I mean, not trying to think of the best way to phrase this. Not not going too far down any rabbit holes or making any particular assumptions, but I've always been kind of a melancholy person. So I'll hit spells here and there where the motivation to complete a project, especially one that's already been started, is very, very difficult. And there's, even for something new like that, it just looked really daunting. On the other hand, and also with that, like so much of the world building, well, the initial, let's say, world skeleton of Party First is mine. At this point, frankly, a ton of the world building is Jerod's as well, because he's done half a dozen supplements, and we partnered up on Twilight War, something like that.
Yeah, I think so.
Um,
No, I am going to jump in here real quick. Is that, I mean,
yeah,
Party First wouldn't be anything without the setting. And that is all yours, right? I'm only playing in that
sure,
sandbox,
yeah,
you know?
right. I mean, and I didn't mean it in any negative way toward that, other than just I wind up feeling like I put a lot of pressure on myself to be like, okay, this needs to be the way I would do it, which is not necessarily the way Jerod would do it. And there's definitely some back and forth there in
For sure.
not only finding the rough spots that stick out higher than the others, so to speak, where I'm like, no, this really needs sanded down, but also the other spots where Jerod's gone off this direction, and I'm like, you know what, like that's cool. Like the fact that I wouldn't have done that, like, doesn't matter. That's a cool thing that should happen. And just that balance takes a lot. So I floated the idea to Jerod, what if we just start a new project from the ground up, like together? So maybe to some extent there's more excitement on my end for a new project. But also maybe it feels like less like my baby in particular that way.
Sure.
And there's more room for you to really expand out there with the type of like ideas you have, because folks, if you have not been behind the scenes with Jerod before, he is a font of ideas. It is just like, to someone like me that operates in fits and starts, it seems like Jerod is just a never-ending fountain, waterfall, deluge of ideas. It's amazing. It's amazing.
Well, thank you so much. And I do want to point out like one thing, give people an idea of how it is within a partnership trying to work on games. I know here's an easy conflict we can talk about that like wasn't extreme or anything, but it's just a good example. Like in the core Party First book, there's a super scientist, basically the scientist character, and one of their abilities is they can just like slap together something MacGyver style into some sort of super science thing. And so for me, like I took that idea, I'm like, okay, well then if people can be a super scientist, that means there's probably a lot more super scientists out there. So then we can go with more like cyborg, like maybe some time travel, some like really crazy far out there stuff. And I sent some of those ideas over to Will, and Will was definitely like, "No, man, that's not how this works." Not in those words,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
yeah, I think that's one of the ways we work well together, though, too.
yeah. I mean, with Party First, I think some of the conceit is that it's a alt history 1980s, so there's like still a level of grounding necessary that like the rest of the world, like the population at large, has to think the world operates largely like our own. Like going back to what you're saying about just a small, not a huge example, even you had one adventure with some train stuff, and you were talking about the like transparent steel, or I forget your term, but effectively, effectively transparent steel from the old EU Star Wars type of thing, right? And I started reading that, and I was like, wait a minute, my brain started going crazy, like, oh, it's so much of the world and like society like snowballs out. Like if this stuff exists and is like in public use, like this doesn't look like our world anymore. And so I had to be like, let's drop that idea.
And I have to tell you, so the adventure, the whole reason I wanted to create that is that this guy creates this plasteel stuff and there's, thousands of miles of train tracks, right? And so they were going to replace the train tracks because it was just going to be better material for the trains to run on time. But someone assassinates that guy because those iron rails are the only thing that kept warring elven or like fey factions from attacking each other.
From like,
so if they tear up the steel tracks, then they'll flood and there'll be war and there'll be discord and all that stuff. That's literally the only reason I wanted to create that.
That's fair. Maybe I cut that idea off a little too early because I do love the bit of this iron line, so to speak, separating them so they can't cross it. That's cool. And that's where I'm telling you, folks, Jerod has these cool ideas.
Well, thanks, man. Now, hopefully, we could get together and figure out what we want to do for our new project. Because I think that's what we're here, and that's what we're all about, trying to get done here.
Yeah. Well, tell you what, I know we chit-chatted a little bit about what we were going to do before, so let's maybe wrap this episode with just a bird's eye view of the tension engine itself, and kind of what its goals or current strengths are. And then next episode we'll pick up with folks where we're kind of figure out what we're tackling next. So the tension engine itself, then, which is what I'm calling the system for Party First, and in theory, when there are more games based on it, they will be hopefully known as Wound by Tension, much like Carved in Brindlewood or Powered by the Apocalypse, or Forged in the Dark, all of those sort of naming conventions. So if we bounce back and forth between those terms, folks, that's what's up. So the tension engine is a D6 roll and keep that the initial concept was actually to provide some kind of cinematic pacing to the game, similar to a horror story or a horror film or something, right? So when you're watching a horror movie and you're 5 minutes in, it's trivial when the main character walks up to their car and unlocks it and gets in and drives, from the beach to their home or whatever. But, an hour into the film, while Jason is walking down the street after them, suddenly it is extremely difficult for them to get their keys out of their pocket. They're fumbling everywhere. They can't get it into the slot. They can't get the car to turn over, whatever it might be. So working with that and trying to gamify that concept is kind of where it started. So what the central mechanic of the game does is, now I'm not going to detail the entire thing in the specific way that Party First does it, but essentially rolling ones on your D6s are going to generate a GM-facing metacurrency called tension. And they can use that as a metacurrency and spend it for adversary abilities and things like that. But also, it represents kind of the difficulty of the world, the environment at large. So early in the game, when that starts off at 2, it is very easy to beat it. But as the game goes, that cranks higher and higher, and it becomes more difficult to succeed. You may be able, in the game by default, you're just keeping the 2 dice, but with different abilities the like, you may be able to push that to keep more in order to still overcome it with some potential downsides, trade-offs of abilities. Maybe you're generating other tension, maybe you're burning some morale or some health or something to do it. So it kind of builds up and up, but only building up, we noticed, has some real downsides as well, in that, eventually it does become impossible to do things, or prohibitively hard from a resource perspective. So we actually went back to kind of the horror trope in films, and a lot of times, as those pacing goes, it's not a steady rise for the whole film. You'll actually come up and you'll have a small break and release some tension. The thing that people thought they heard outside that was the killer turned out to be a dog, rummaging in the dumpster or whatever it might be, and it falls, and then you build back up again. So we added a tension break where once the tension pool gets up to a certain point, in party first it's 10. Who knows? Maybe we'll play with that later. But then you have a tension break and something happens. The main system uses a tension table, which is a D6 table, to kind of semi-randomize those events. What it might be to kind of keep your players on their toes. Probably negative things, being a horror game here. But it also means they can't be certain. They know they're building to something bad as tension gets closer and closer to 10, but they don't know exactly what it's going to be. So that is kind of the main highlight from my end. There's also some other smaller interlocking systems that maybe are more particular to the world of Party First, where it's this communist society, and we played around with the idea of no one being better than anyone else. So there are group or party stats equal to whoever is the lowest in any particular thing, which also makes struggles of various kinds more difficult for you to actually beat. But you can kind of rise above to use your own personal stuff at the cost of using up some party points that you've earned. So there's a trade-off to use the lower group stats to get party points to help push you later to use your own higher stats. So in my mind, those are the main interlocking pieces. And I feel like I've really been rattling on here for a while. So, Jerod, save me
Yeah,
from this monologue.
yeah. No, no, you're doing great. There's just like the two things to point out there because the system. That's one of the things I really like about the system, though, is that it does get fairly involved with the setting. So the tension engine within Party First is that so you do start here with the tension, right, and then it spikes up, and then that means that the game master is getting, or the escort, or whatever you want to call it, is getting all these tension points to be able to spend to make the adventure harder, or to forward clocks, or to do whatever the adventure is set up as, or to release on this tension table as well. The tension table is brilliant. It's amazing. Now that I've gotten to spend more time looking at different games, you get into this. I love the game Night Witches by Bully Pit.
Ooh, I hear good things, but I haven't been able to ever play.
It's just an elegant system. It's another thing that combines the system with the settings so well. And I think that's just something I'm going to repeat over and over again because that's kind of my mantra at this point. um, but you get to this point that bad things have to happen, and we're going to get into an area of well, the players choose well, am I going to roll the less good option to try and avoid some of the tension over here, knowing that I have a higher chance of failure? Or do I go after it on my own, risking getting more attention to give to the game master? But the players get their own resources too. So it's just well done. it's very well done. I cannot wait to break it down even more. And I'll talk about some of that stuff in future episodes for sure.
Oh, definitely, definitely. If anybody wants to go check it out and see kind of the bare bones option, the SRDs out there now. You can find it on Drive Through RPG, Itch, and Fari community now. So just check out the Tension Engine. There's honestly enough basic stuff in there that you could probably play a pretty straightforward fantasy dungeon crawler type of thing with just the info in the SRD.
And I don't want to give away all this information, but that's kind of why we're doing this too, right? To get people excited about it. Is what if the tension table is just your wandering monsters? Like if you just do that,
Ooh.
easy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm simple, straightforward right there. But honestly, now when you said that, it's got me wondering, could I make that into a solo game? Could I hack that into a solo dungeon crawl
Yeah.
with
I was
maybe
thinking
kind of
about
Iron Sword inspired, and then where that triggers and then causes stuff to spawn? Like,
yes,
damn it, Jared.
100%. Like, and that was going to be another pitch I was going to throw too. What about a solo fantasy game?
Oh man, you're speaking my language there. I love solo stuff these days. Okay. Well, folks, I think unless Jared's got anything else, that's probably it for episode 1, and then we'll kind of let the juices flow in episode 2.
I promise we'll come up with the title at some point in time, or not. I don't know. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone. And